another of the retiring white hats referees in the Big 12 Conference, and he's going to move on and help the NFL in training their referees and their future referees. And I can't think of a better guy to do it. I honestly, and we said this yesterday with Cooper Castleberry, Dave Hunziker and I have probably had as good an attendance record going to the Big 12 officials clinic, or the CFO West, I guess, officials clinic in Dallas in the summer of anybody. And honestly, don't know if I've been around a finer football official. They all take it seriously, but let me tell you something. Mike Defee is, the highest character, great guy. You want to be around him, but you also have the great confidence that the game is going to be officiated at the highest level when he's in your stadium on your Saturday, and we're going to miss him. He joins us now. Mike, how are you?
Doing fine, and thank you for the kind comments. Doing well.
That's one of the things, and Dave and I talk about it a lot, is that we've enjoyed in our job is getting the inside of going to clinic, meeting all of you guys, understanding where your mindset is. And I wish every fan could do it, because I think fans go in and they look at the guys in stripes almost as like an enemy to their team. And if you realized just exactly the work that goes into it, the sincerity and the high aims that each of the officials have to do their job the best it can be done, I think fans would have a completely different attitude if they could just get a little insight to what you guys do.
No, I agree. I think that people just don't understand everything that goes into the result on Saturday. They see it for 3.5 hours, but there's just so much more to the preparation than meets the eye. I'll never forget, I brought my dad to one of our games. We had a Thanksgiving Day game or night game. It was Texas TCU, and he and I were going out hunting. We had a place further out west, and that was the reason he came with me. And so he kind of got to sit in and see what we do from a meeting standpoint and all the things that go on. And afterwards, he's just like, wow. He said, hey, you guys need some PR. He said, I had no earthly idea that you guys did as much as you do and getting us in detail, into what you do. And so, yeah, there's a lot that goes into it that doesn't meet the eye. And I think, hey, look, guys like you and your programs and things, I think the more education that we do of the fan base, the better it is. Being transparent about what we do, why we do it, how we do it, can't do anything but help them understand what we strive to do anyway.
You were in Stillwater last year at the opening of fall camp. Johnny Barr brought you in for their extreme camp up there to talk to the extreme campers, which are fans that come in and spend the first 3 days with the football team as they're going through meetings and practices and so forth. And I thought you were a big hit. The fans couldn't get enough of it, which I thought was fantastic. Even a good friend of ours on the show, longtime college official Ken Houck, came over and chatted it up with you. But it was a long season this year. I know we missed you. I think it was our Texas game you were assigned, and you had flooding down there in Texas. And when we heard that, I hated to hear that you were dealing with that. But your last season in college officiating, what went into your decision to go with the NFL and get into the training position, and how much do you think you're going to miss this? Because we're going to miss you.
Well, I'm clearly going to miss all of you guys, and the guys that worked on my crew, all the coaches. The experience is just unlike anything else. And my other job, the one that really pays the bills, I manage a pretty large company down here in the Beaumont area. And much like Oklahoma, the area that I live in, we're dependent on oil and gas.
Yeah.
And so with this COVID virus issue, and with the low price of oil, we've got some significant issues and concerns. We've got probably, I normally work roughly 800 employees. We've got more than 200 on furlough right now as a result of this, and I think that we've got some ongoing concerns to the fall. And one of my biggest fears was that I couldn't commit to every single weekend in the fall because of my responsibilities to the company that I work for. And of course, Walt Anderson was hired for training and development, head of officiating for training and development for the National Football League. And he and I had been talking for a while. I've always had a ton of respect for Walt and he for me. And we had some discussions over time about the potential maybe down the road of working together again. And we met, and I told him what my dilemma was, and so he offered the flexibility of being able to work around my schedule, and so part of my role and responsibility for the new job will be he's going to install the same basic training program that we have in the Big 12, or that he had in the Big 12, and so, it's a very much a referee-driven program, meaning that the referee is an extension of the league office in terms of evaluating the crew. We're the first evaluator of the game. And there's a lot of things that go into that, because you have to deal with the psyche of the 7 people that you're really close with on the crew, and be realistic about our performance and the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so there's a psychology that goes with that. And so I'm going to be working with their referees to help them better acclimate to that environment and the program. And so looking forward to that. But again, it allows me to have some flexibility to meet the needs of my main job.
Yeah. The interesting thing with that is there are so many former Big 12 officials that are on the roster for the National Football League. I mean, some guys that I got to see work a lot. Clete Blakeman is one of those guys. He's a white hat. And then I'm trying to think. Scott Novak is a white hat.
Yep.
He was in the Big 12.
Scott was my referee in 2009. That was my last year as a back judge, and so
right.
Scott was my referee. In fact, Clete Blakeman, just before he went to the NFL, I worked the first Big 12 championship game that I'd worked was with Clete. It was Oklahoma and Missouri down in the Alamo Dome, and I think that was 2007. So, yeah, Adrian Hill's another official that came out of the Big 12 that's working there in a white hat. And so Sean Hockley, Ed's son, Sean was in our program. He's a West Coast guy. And went over to the Pac-12, but ultimately got into the league, and so I've actually blessed. I've had three people off my crew go to the NFL, and just recently, Joe Blueball, my field judge, was just picked up into the league for this coming year.
Wow. Okay, that's fantastic. Yeah, I had to tell my Sean Hockley story yesterday. We have an interesting story about old Sean. When he went to the Pac-12, his first year, he was a white hat in the Pac-12, and OSU was playing Arizona out there, and just to make the story short, this was the substituting situation. OSU, didn't substitute. Arizona felt like they had to on defense, and they didn't get the guy off, and play was run. Mike Gundy saw on the video board they didn't get their guy off, and so he yells out there, hey, there should have been a flag for too many men on the field, and Hockley and his umpire come over, and of course, me, I'm over there standing where I can hear everything, and Mike says, hey, that I want that reviewed. That should be a penalty. We should get 5 yards and replay the down, and Hockley looked at him and said, Coach, we can't review that, and the umpire's over going, yeah, and I'm over there nodding, going, I think you can, and they did. They reviewed it. Sean wasn't real happy that Mike stumped him there on that early deal. So there were. Yeah, I won't go any further with that. It just was it was dicey the rest of the way.
Oh
Um,
wow.
Hey, let's, I want you to explain to people how you got into this because I was reading the story in The Athletic. You're getting, you've always been a guy people respected and got a lot of publicity, which I know is kind of anti officiating, but you got into this late. And I remember you telling the story in Stillwater last year to the campers how you got into it. And, it's interesting because even though you got into it late, you rose really quickly.
Yeah, I was blessed. Of course, I always, first of all, and I think you'll probably find this of pretty much every football official is that all of us have a tremendous love of the game. You have to have passion for it. I was a big fan of the game, whether it was high school football or college football or NFL football, and I was coaching my son's Pop Warner football team, and played a little golf, and I had a good friend of mine that I played a little bit with, and he was a high school referee, and he had talked me into coming out, and so I did, and man, I really, really enjoyed it, and I'll tell you, it was funny. It was an epiphany, right? So I'm one of those guys that think I know everything there is to know because I've seen so many football games, and so I started officiating football, and I was like, man, there's so little that I really do know. I started going to clinics because I didn't ever want to cost anyone a ball game because of my incompetence. So I remember one of the first clinics I went to was in Denton, Texas, and met some really good people, guys that maybe a lot of people wouldn't even remember. Dick Hantack and was a
Mm-hmm.
former NFL referee. He was there. A guy named Gary Lane, has since passed, was there. And a young Carl Johnson. Carl came out of the Big 12, and he had just left the Big 12 and had went into the NFL. And anyway, long story short, it was a journey to try to be a better football official, and I think part of it, my maturity is, I was like 33 or so when I started, so I was already a little bit more mature than most, so it took about 6 years, and I got picked up. A guy named Tim Millis, who used to be the supervisor of the Big
Oh, I
12.
know Tim.
Yeah, Tim saw me at a couple of clinics and was he tipped off a guy named Jim Harvey, who was the supervisor at that time of the Southland Conference, and Jim ended up picking me up, and I worked 5 years in the Southland Conference, 4 as a back judge, last one as a referee, and in 2005 I worked my first Big 12 game for Tim. It was the first game of the season. It was Labor Day. By the way, the hottest football game I've ever worked in my life, and it was at Kansas State with Florida International. I think Don Strock was the head coach there, and it was
Yeah.
so hot. I'm telling you, they gave us drinks at halftime that they give to cancer patients for dehydration, and it was just brutally hot. But anyway, the following year, Tim hired me full time in January of 2006, and then he promptly retired and took a job with the NFLRA, the Referees Association, and that's when they hired Walt Anderson, and fortunately Walt honored Tim's hires and went on to the career that I had, and I tell you, there's so many people that I have to thank for that have helped me along the way. Randy Crystal was my mentor. He was a tremendous referee in his day, but it's been a journey. But I'll tell you, Walt Anderson is I know different people may feel different ways, but he is an absolute officiating genius. He reminds me a little bit of Butch Harmon. Butch Harmon was a good golfer, but he was a great teacher. I mean, he taught Tiger
Right.
Woods and so many different people, and I think Anderson's the same way. He was a really good football official in college and in the NFL, but he is just a tremendous teacher, and he'll be a really a tremendous asset to the NFL, and I'm looking forward to helping him in some way.
Yeah, I think he has been, and he's the guy that really opened it up, the clinic in the summer to the media, and he's the guy that, I mean, I have his phone number, I have his cell number, so does Dave. In fact, that little story about Sean Hockley, the next morning we're driving to the airport, and it's a Sunday, but it's the Sunday I think the week before the NFL kicked off, and we called. Uh, uh, Called Walt on the phone riding to the airport. He answers and he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I didn't see it, but I've heard about it." He goes, "We're going to take a look at it." But he goes, "Guys, it wasn't our game. It was a Pac-12 crew." And he said, "But yeah, we've already gotten a few phone calls on it." But Walt was like that. He said, "Anytime you guys have a question, even during a broadcast, we've called him up in a commercial break, and if he was watching the game, it was almost like having our own official interpreter
Hmm.
that could help us out." And that's how much Walt wanted to get the right message out in the media. And so yeah, Walt is a huge friend of ours, and we he's been great for the media that covers college football. So yeah, I can't say enough nice things about Walt. And the same thing, with you. And here's Cooper. Yesterday we had him on the show. I didn't realize Reggie was going to the Big Ten. Um, this is going to be sad for me because I'm losing some of my best friends down there on the field, guys that I really enjoyed being around. And again, you had a tremendous crew, Cooper with Jim Adams and Scott Gaines, guys like that. You get to know these guys, and you really can relate. And so yeah, I'm going to miss you guys.
Well, we're going to miss you guys too, and I think the one thing, and I hope this continues, but part of this is it's a transparency. You build a lot of relationships, whether it's co-officials, coaches, players, media. And you develop a trust, and there were times when I felt like it was important. Maybe something had happened in the game that I needed to get to you, or felt like I needed to get some information that would help you, get some insight out to our fans. That's important to me. Is the more they know, the more we can educate them. The better fan they'll be, and so that's what I think. We've evolved, and we still got a ways to go, but we want to be as transparent about everything that we do, because none of us have an agenda. We just simply want to go out there and allow the athletes and coaches to shine. We're the balance, and the thing that we've always tried to adopt, especially on our crew, was to be minimally invasive. Our primary responsibility is the safety of our players, first and foremost, and so, then there's a certain element of the game in terms of your administrative fouls, whether it's formation or false starts and offsides and things that they're there and you just have to deal with. And the bigger part of our game is probably the subjective part, is what we call advantage, disadvantage fouls. And that's the areas that we want to be as good as we can be. Don't want to over-officiate those areas, and that's where I use the term minimally invasive. We only want to interject ourselves in the game when a player's actions force us to do so, and because the game's about the players and it's about the coaches, and we want them to be able to shine.
Now, I hate this because I could have opened it up and said, "Hey, tell us some stories," because I know you got some. But here's the other thing I want people to understand with you: you've worked, not only Big 12 championships, you've worked national championship games. That's where I think a lot of people started to notice the biceps. And then you've worked every major bowl game. I mean, when you talk about the places you've been with officiating and the events you've been a part of, man, do you ever pinch yourself? Just, man.
Yeah, I do. I absolutely do. I think about that, and probably have thought about it more maybe recently than I did maybe. There's something to be said about smell the roses. And I've been so blessed to put my feet in places that what I always considered hallowed ground, whether it was the Rose Bowl, Notre Dame. I actually got to work a game at Lambeau Field.
Yeah.
And been in Birmingham where Bear Bryant walked the field, and it's just there's just so much history in our game that I think about. And of course, anytime I went to those places, I tried to take in everything that they had, whether it was a Hall of Fame or just there's always different things. That you can go to. Worked up at Army, because with our partnership with the Mountain West Conference, had an opportunity to work Army, Air Force, and an Air Force Navy. Of course, I never worked the Army Navy game. That's a dream game for everybody. But being able to go to those academies and see the history of football. I think a lot of people that are older understand how important the years of Doc Blanchard at Army and of course Roger Staubach at Navy and there's a lot of rich tradition of football in those academies.
Well, hey Mike, it's been a treat to get to know you. I hope we get to see you some, and good luck with the NFL training position. Tell Walt we said hello, and again, you're a treasure to your craft, but you're also someone that everybody can, when you look at football officials, really respect and admire. And so I know you're going to do some good for those guys at that level. And boy, I hope the NFL, I hope the Big 12 guys coming up can hold up to the level you guys have set between you and Cooper, Reggie, and some of these guys. I guess Eddie Shelton's retiring this year. We've had some great officiating, so I appreciate you coming on with us.
Robert, I appreciate it. It's been my pleasure to deal with you guys and the coaches. I'll miss you. But like Walt, you have my number. Don't ever hesitate to reach out. Be happy to talk to you and try to help you in any way that I can.
Hey, and best with your company and everything through this. Hopefully we'll get a football season going here, and we don't know about that, but best to you and your family.
Thank you so much, Robert. Same to all you and all your listeners. We appreciate you. The one thing I've always loved about being up in Oklahoma, they love their football, and I always enjoyed that experience, and good luck to all you guys.
Hey, appreciate it.
Take care.
Mike. All right, Mike Defee, one of the all-time best in the college game.